Alrighty, so good morning everyone again. This talk is going to be an interactive demonstration of ZOE. We're just going to walk through a demo that our sales demo for the ProMat show in Chicago, which we did a few months ago. And with that said, I'm just going to drop into a terminal here. We really only care about it right now running on Windows and Linux. We also have a Mac build, but don't have any customers in production that care about running it on the Mac. So this is what ZOE looks like. This is a typical application. It doesn't have to look like this. This is just kind of how things have evolved over the years. And what that typically is some kind of a main menu with a toolbar across the top, and some of those are statuses, some are menus. And then at the bottom, and you'll see this on most industrial type HMIs, you have some kind of an alarming window. And you can see either critical or non-critical alarms. You'll see stuff like conveyors full, and jams are typical alarms on the conveyors. So that's something that you can turn on and off. So if I left click over here on images, that brings me to a new area. And let's go to the first floor. And what these are out in the field are cameras. And so the package will come down a conveyor, trigger a photo eye, and that photo eye will make the camera take a picture of it, and then the camera decodes the barcode, sends it back to one of our Rebol services, say, okay, I've got this package right here, it's flying down the conveyor belt, what the hell do I want to do with it? And our service will look it up in a database, see what it is, where does it need to go, and it will send that routing decision down to the PLC. So that's kind of what's happening in the background. So if I keep on left clicking here, I can come in and kind of see what was read, and I can hit the B key for back and back my way up. We have web browser style keys as well for backing up. So what happened here was, if you click in, I'm just clicking down deeper into the canvas. So this is a panning zooming interface. So if I use my middle scroll wheel of my mouse, I can move backwards through the interface. I'm middle click panning. I'm clicking my middle mouse button so I can pan around. You can see that this is just a pretty big canvas right here. So, and that also translates well to the Microsoft Surface tablet for the touch, so you can just use your finger to pan it around, and you can pinch zoom. So all those gestures are mapped. They're just actually mapped down to the same mouse actions. Hit the H key to go home. And at this 30,000 foot level here, different people want to be in different areas. Like the maintenance guys probably want to be over here in the graphics area looking at the conveyors. Yeah, and in fact, what you're seeing here, mostly you'll see there's a legend right here, and that tells you not only the different devices, but also the color codes for the statuses of the conveyors, like stopped and running. So you see a lot of running conveyor here, then over in the lower left, you see that orange conveyor. So that's the full conveyor. So from a color coding point of view, the states will change. So about every second or so, it's reading all this data from the PLC, and it's animating that based on the machine data. Also, you'll notice these little things right here. These are actually the photo eyes. So when a package, right now this red line here is showing a beam, like a light beam basically. And when a package crosses here, that light beam will go away, and it shows that there's an object right there. So all that animates as well. So you're able to see when packages have broken the photo eyes beam, and you can also see when solenoids turn on. So if a solenoid turns on, that might shift product to a different direction. So we showed the solenoids on here as well. That actually is a limit switch. So you can see these field devices in here. There's a barcode scanner right there. Let's see here, if I zoom in a little bit more. So you'll notice when I was farther out, you weren't able to see all these field devices like the scanner and the photo eyes and such. And that's part of the semantic zoom is. So as I zoomed in, as I clicked in and got deeper, these things kind of appeared out of nowhere. Because really, when you're farther away, you care about seeing the conveyor and the color coding of the conveyor. And a lot of if this were in a control room, a lot of times they'll just stick this up on a couple monitors and just show different areas of the system at 30,000 at a higher level, and they just look at the color. But in the HMI world, you really don't want to have a lot of unnecessary color. You want things to be kind of monochrome. We use a little more color than we should, but that's because that's our tradition in this industry. If you're in oil and gas or some other process, you're going to see a very drab gray screen. And then when something happens that the operator needs to know about, that's when you see color. So that's how things work there. And I can keep clicking on stuff. We have all of our documentation embedded in the HMI. So I just clicked on the link for a photo eye, and there's what that photo eye actually is in the field. And this stuff seems like, of course, why would you not have it? But in a lot of HMIs, you don't have any linked-in documentation, and it usually ends up in a maintenance toolbox or lost forever. So one of the things we do is we link in all the critical documentation, including electrical drawings, everything really. It's a lot of work to do that. This was a barcode scanner that we looked at earlier, and that's the image for it. And then you can see the read rate is 84%. That's actually a terrible read rate. Read rate should be in the high 90s. So this is just sample data, but in the field there'd be, why is that read rate so low? Of course, we have the manuals as far as info, but you have useful stuff in here for the maintenance guy or the technician. Hey, that's where the IP address is. Why don't you try to ping it? So we integrate pinging in with all of our stuff too, and it just calls out in Rebol to the ping command, which redirects it to a text file, and the text file is displayed right there. The nice thing in ZOE is you go really deep down into something and you might lose your way or get lost. The best thing to do is just zoom out a little to get your bearings again. So in this case here, we're down at that scanner level. So where are we exactly? We're in PIC Mod 2, zone 13 and 14. And then if you just manually zoom out, you can kind of see where we came from. Now we're back up at the 30,000 foot level. And just quickly, we looked at conveyor graphics, we looked at images. Here's the dashboard. This is kind of interesting. So a manager is probably going to spend most of his time here. So you've got some statistics, you've got some graphs and trend charts. Let's see, under history, system logs. So this is typically what one of our data grids looks like. One point in ZOE, because we have this panning zooming paradigm, there are no scroll bars in ZOE. So we played around with ideas. Instead of having a scroll bar, why don't we just let a data table extend down as far as it wants to, and we follow as it needs to. You can follow it deeper into the canvas, and so at a higher level, it stays within an area, but it could be a mile long if you wanted it to be. But we played with that idea, and it didn't work well because you had to zoom in, and there were other things that were wrong. So we ended up with a web style navigation where you have first, next, last, back, and that seems to work okay. So you can search in it, you can go to a certain page, you can kind of see how big your data table is right here in the lower left. So crane info, that's where that pan zoom took us. And he also has another legend down here telling you what's going on. And what these are just robot cranes. They're cranes that come and pick up a pallet and they go down an aisleway and they put it on a shelf somewhere. So these are automatic, fully automatic robot cranes that are doing all this. And that in and of itself is very cool. The screen doesn't really show that, but it's just showing statuses in here. But and you kind of tell from here the aisle info, where is it at, what is it currently doing, and then here is a recovery area. I don't think this shows up when everything's working properly, but when there's an error, you can help guide the crane through the error recovery process. Yeah, I'm just going to quickly go through a few more of these to give you a flavor for things. So this is sorter lane assignment. If I want to say the USPS, and we want that to go to lane 5, we can add that in there, and it adds that to the bottom of the list. I mean, really for the purposes of this demo, it's just kind of showing you how we can use some of our built-in widgets to build in configuration screens, and likewise I can go in and delete that assignment. So in this example, we have a 7-lane sorter with a hospital lane, and hospital means exceptions. So if it can't read it or there's some problem with a package, or maybe a package is where it shouldn't be, you don't want to sort it to a lane and have it ship out of a truck somewhere. So you send it to the hospital lane. and then somebody's down there and they'll look at it and figure out, well, why is it down here? All right, a couple more screens here. This is more for diagnostics. It's giving us information about our control logics, our PLC, and all of the different I/O cabinets we have out there. All of our I/O that controls the machine, it's all hanging off of Ethernet. And there's the list of IP addresses for all the different cabinets and workstations. Reporting. So scanner stats report, and we always output in either CSV or PDF. Just click one of those, and it brings up a PDF report. Now, if you go over here and look at, let's see, in the reports folder. So you'll notice that we have, some of this has already been generated. So we have both PostScript, PDF, and CSV files generated. And there's the actual Rebol report that's generated that builds that. And we're using, is it in here or is it in the library? We're actually using the one of the community libraries to do the PDF generation. So that's a little bit of reporting. And we typically, these are two out-of-the-box reports everybody gets because 100% of the time there's no changes to any of these reports for fault history and scanner stats. This one's a little bit more detailed because you can choose your output type, summary or detail, and then you can do filtering by different areas with this drop-down box. And then we have a date picker and a time. So it usually takes a second or two to generate these reports. It's doing the SQL query and then it's doing the PDF generation. So that's possible. So just to kind of give you a little flavor of what the widgets look like and how we lay out applications. That's about it. This is a little bit more of a detailed, because we can pause and restart orders, assign shoots. So I mean, really what this doesn't matter. It's just kind of how we can use our building blocks to make our application for the customer. And that's a good point too. So we have this thing called the base HMI. So you start out with a shell of this. As far as the general layout, there's usually some things predefined like the histories, the active alarms, settings. So there's certain, and the reports. So those certain things, that comprises our base HMI, which is the same from project to project. And then we just build it out for whatever the customer needs. For example, if we don't have any graphics. There's a real simple version of ZOE. Some customers don't want to pay for all the extra stuff, so we just give them a very basic control system, and this is probably as simple as it gets. You have the ability to start and stop stuff. It's almost like a push button station. And then you have alarms, and that's about it. One nice thing down here at the alarm grid, so you could have hundreds and hundreds of conveyors. How do you get to areas quickly to look at them? So if you have an alarm up here like this conveyor full, you can just click on the area. Oops, you click on the unit. Maybe you click on the unit. Yeah, you click on the unit, and it just takes you right there. So you're right down in your trouble area, and you can see, oh, the red beam's gone here. So that indicates that something is blocking that photo eye. So the reason we have a full conveyor is that eye was blocked for a certain number of seconds, which means that whole conveyor line is backed up. So that's why it is. And you have system control here. And if you don't really know where that's at, you can back up and kind of see where it is, in the system. So there's a similar feature here with search. So I could put in the unit number, which is SC22, and it will also take me there as well. Well, there's a couple more little things. So under help here, we have about ZOE, and this brings up kind of a diagnostic screen, and it tells you about the different version numbers, the builds of ZOE. And then down here on the HMI stats, we have the all-important database connections. They're all disabled right now, but you can see that we actually have 5 different database connections that we maintain in ZOE, so we can have 5 pipes to pile in all of our SQL queries, which we do a ton of SQL queries usually in these types of applications. And lastly, we have we can auto-update ZOE. This pulls ties into the database. So Tim has an external utility, so he can work on his development machine and have a new version, and he just pushes it to the database. And then this ZOE periodically looks in the database to see, hey, is there a new version available? So that's that. And for the second part of the talk, this is just a pull from our Git repository, our GitLab repository at the office. And so I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into it. So here we have an almost blank canvas. And, you know, starting with a blank sheet of paper, it's enough to terrify anybody. That's why, and the thing about ZOE is you're kind of like lost in space. It's like you have no frame, you have no references, no planets, no stars. You're just in this void. So the first thing anybody does in a blank ZOE application is he drops a widget on there just for sanity, just so he can get his bearings. And I'm at the home screen right now. Another thing about ZOE is this is a live coding environment. I don't know if that's the right term to use these days, but there's no concept of a development and a runtime mode. And in the HMI world, you always develop and then you compile and run your screen. And even in Visual Studio and Android Studio and these other types of studios, you always expect to have a form where you're dropping widgets. You can left click and it selects it, and then you got an inspector over here, so no, this is always live all the time. When you're dropping a widget, it's live. And most of the time the widget's not configured, so it's not going to be, it's benign, it's not going to do anything bad. We've had to change the way that we like right click on something and bring up the properties. Because when you left click and right click on this button widget right here, it's a live widget, so it's going to do its normal thing. That left click is routed to the widget, and if it has a on-click event handler, it's going to execute that handler. So that's really, there's only a couple extra things you got to learn in ZOE. You know, if you want to bring up the property sheet, you control right click, which is what you have right there. And then you're going to see your quick start, what we call the click start menu. This is all the stuff that you're most likely going to be using. And then if you click here, you get the more advanced menu. And it is categorized as core visibility widget. You can click more to bring up extra things. And here are all the different events that have been exposed. Just delete that. So I just set up a couple of widgets to do some simple things. We're just going to go in here and type ZOE is great. And then we're going to click this, and of course it did what you thought it would do. It just set that text up here when I clicked the button. So what exactly happened there? I can go in and control right click on my button. And oh, by the way, the property sheet is just another widget on the canvas. You can zoom in it, you can leave it there. But there is there's the text that did what we just saw. So there are two common value functions in ZOE, are set value and get value. Set value requires a widget name and a property name as lit words, and then the actual value, whatever that is. And it has to be a value that the widget would expect. And in this case, instead of putting a value in there, I just did a get value from that text box, that text field down there in the left corner. So I just named it, and then I said I want to pull the text field out of there. And it's as simple as it looks. There's really nothing beyond that. So that's a trivial example, but it kind of gives you an idea of what the ZOE workflow looks like. You're laying out widgets, you're configuring them, you're setting event scripts. It gets a lot deeper than this for advanced applications, of course. So, and then the same down here with the color. So I can come down here and let's, just for fun, go in, and this will show you a couple more widgets. Let's change the text dash color. And we actually have a color picker for this. You can set the RGB alpha, or we can just pick another color here and set that. Awful contrast, but when I click it right here, it's doing the same thing. So just very, very simple examples. But that is the ZOE workflow. Now, in the environment, in the live programming environment here, we also have two other things. If you right-click on the canvas, that brings up what we call the ZOE menu. This is a configurable menu. This is kind of the default but you can redefine what you see here. So every app engineer, if he has his favorite set of widgets, he can put them in near the top, and he can rearrange all these other features, inserting options for the widgets, select all, grouping, moving things forward and backwards, alignment. It's things you'd expect to see in a development environment. Some navigation things. So we have that, and when you right-click in a non-editing mode, you're going to see a different menu here. It's a shorter menu. It mostly just has navigational stuff in it. But what the ZOE guy will do, the ZOE engineer, is he'll, instead of having like all these insert widgets, he'll put shortcuts to all the different areas in the system. So that's the ZOE menu. If you hit escape, that brings up this screen-sized dialog that's kind of translucent that lets you enter a command. There's a list of a lot of the commands. It's probably about 80% of them down here on the bottom. So quickly, I'm just going to stick a button on there. We got a live button. So as you've seen, we have a decent widget set. It does most of the things we need to do, but there's certain things about it. It's kind of rough around the edges. Things aren't quite lined up right. I mean, that's something we've talked about, smoothing the edges over. We do that. It takes over time. This stuff gets done, and the widgets are right here. There's really no secret to where this stuff exists. And this is really nice because now you can visually see what widgets are available. And so you can kind of get an idea of what we have here. Some of them are very standard, like checkbox, radio buttons. So if I come in here and just say right-click, insert other. So if they're not on the quick menu here, this actually brings the pop-up up. And if I want a radio button, for example, I just type radio, and now I've got my radio buttons here, which are live out of the box. Control right-click, and I can put in some radio text here, which in this case, it's just space-delimited strings for each of the different radio buttons. Let's see here. So if I put in a radio 6, save that. Yeah, so it just it brought in my 6th button. So it's just counting whatever my text is. So we have all the usual suspects checkboxes too. So there's our checkbox, and you can put in text, and just save that. So and of course you're just going to script the on-click button to do whatever you want your checkbox to do. Other interesting things for widgets would be our this table. Yeah, so there's our data grid. I am not going to configure this for you because it's a little more complicated, but you got your column headers here, and just because of the defaults, it kind of shows you that, hey, you can embed stuff more than text and numbers in here. So you can put in checkboxes and a progress bar of all things. And actually, we use this quite a lot for scanner statistics. So we'll have a table of scanners, our barcode scanners, and our read rates will show up right here. So we can embed those little graphs right into our data table. And if I control right-click on that, there's column percentages. You've probably seen this in other tools for measuring your column widths by a ratio, the number of rows we're going to show, heading text, titles, and inner widgets. Ah, yes, the inner widgets. So right there, that's a definition, and it uses strings here. Probably could use words, but that's fine. So we got a text column, a check column, a progress bar column, and another text column. So give you a little bit of a flavor there of how stuff works. Now, one thing that Tim's been doing lately is he's been making smart widgets. So the core of ZOE is one thing. It's 3,000 or 4,000 lines of Rebol code. And partly because I wrote that code and I've been doing more management stuff in recent years, he's been asking me for features. I need this, I need that, and sometimes I get it in, and other times it goes for a year and doesn't get done. So he basically just said, to hell with you. he never said that. Tim's an awesome guy. He would never say anything like that to me, not to my face. But he went ahead and said, I know what environment I'm working in. I'm just going to make my widgets smarter. So he basically put in the design of this table widget some right-click functionality, and he's added in some things that he would like to see. And I don't think all of this, some of this is brand new, because I know David Gable's working on it. But he put in the ability to say, okay, this is going to be more than one page of data, so I want a multi-page. So he's adding in all these widgets, which is a text widget, 4 button widgets, and then another text in the text field. And then also he's adding in a search box near the top. So and now if you recognize that from the ProMat demo, this looks very much like our standard data grid. It actually works quite well. You know, if you, another thing for how you select stuff, control left click selects something. So I just selected that field there and this one right here. And his table widget has some idea of what these things are called, because I believe if I right click and do it again, yeah, he can turn it off. And the only reason, and he's not turning something on and off, he's inserting and deleting widgets on the canvas is what he's doing. And I can turn off the multi-page too. Now for our conveyor widgets, you saw how all those connect together. If you thought about having to do that manually, oh man, you got straight sections, you got these little 45 or 90-degree angle curves, you got angles coming in for sawtooth merges and things like that. Because we do it so often, that little rectangular thing has lots of features in it. So if I came in and inserted a conveyor, it doesn't look like much, it's a rectangle. But there's actually a lot of smarts built into that. So if I control right click on that, this conveyor has a sense of direction, of size. You can name it, and naming it is important to animating the colors of it. So you name it a particular name, and then it knows how to go get its data for that from the PLC. Do I put my descriptive text on the left or the right size? All these photo eyes right here and this blending. The blending lets you put one conveyor on top of another. This killed us even in traditional HMIs. If you have a conveyor here and you have another one here, and a lot of times in three-dimensional space, these conveyors overlap each other because they exist in three-dimensional space. We've got a 2D grid here. So if you want to click on this one, but you actually click over, there's one on top of it, that blend attribute lets it bleed through. So the mouse event passes through the upper widget and drops down into the lower widget. And that solved the problem that was killing us for a long time. How do you get the mouse click to the right conveyor when there's overlapping conveyor? Because you always had to know, and operators learn this eventually, I can't click right there because it's going to click the wrong conveyor. So you have, the programmer has full control over that, and it's completely, this is all custom scripting. It's baked into the widget, and it's not something that the poor hapless controls engineer has to worry about anymore. So another neat thing is you have a conveyor and it has associated things with it, like a control panel and other types of devices. You can turn on features like here, we'll have a full photo eye, and then it pops up automatically. And that could also be a separate widget on its own. So you might have these things separated. But what you can do is, another smartness of the widget is it knows what group it's in now. So this conveyor widget, if you want to group it together and have one name for it, like this is conveyor C300, you just have to name it from the conveyor and then select all your pieces for C whatever, 300, and then group it. And the act of grouping it, when that happens, the conveyor says, oh crap, I got other widgets that are in my group now. Let me go out and name all those widgets automatically. So instead of having to identify and tag each of those widgets to a particular type of conveyor, they can auto configure themselves because they know, hey, I'm part of this group, so let me go ahead and do that. And then as soon as you do that, everything is configured and you can ungroup it. But yeah, so that's some of the smartness of widgets, and this is going to continue to evolve, and this is popular in the process industry too, being able to trend things, and you can, I think this widget right now will save stuff in the CSV automatically, so if you pour data into it, it'll show it to you, it gives you your history, you can take snapshots of it, and, send it out as an image. So this was one of those things where we had a really simple one for a long time, and then a customer said, hey, we want you to do this for us, and we added all those features in for that one customer, but now it's available for everybody, for all of our customers. And in the HMI world, in the SCADA world, this is probably, you always find a trend widget, so we've got that one covered too. And as you can see, you never run out of space. So you can take an entire plant and then zoom out on it and put another plant. And that's something we've been trying to get customers interested in, is doing plant-wide ZOE as well as multi-plant ZOE. Say we can put your entire global operation on one canvas. Yeah, that's a reason why we want to scale. We want to scale because we got to put hundreds of thousands of widgets on the screen. But we're scaling pretty good, and we, with Skia Rebol, with some of the other optimizations we talked about yesterday, with our ability to maybe use the tiny C compiler to optimize certain things in our draw screen function, we're going to get there. And for our day-to-day customers, for the lion's share of our projects, we're already there. This is fine. The performance is good for most of what we do. You notice I'm panning and zooming around here, and this thing over on the left, this toolbar here, it's not moving. So it's just another widget. And what this is it has a particular property set called sticky. And the best way to think about a sticky widget is that it sticks to the screen, it sticks to the glass of your screen. And to demonstrate that with the ZOE is great text, I'm going to stick that right up here in the corner, and I'm going to control right click, and I know the sticky feature is pretty deeply buried. Most of the time you don't need it. So I'm going to set that, and now you'll notice it stays there. So that's how we implement these little toolbars. And that top bar in the demo, that top bar was just a sticky widget. So now it stays with us wherever we go. And if you want to unsticky that, so I'm going to take that off, and notice when I click OK, it goes back to where it was. So its XYZ coordinates, it knew where its home was. We just said, hey, become sticky, stay with us a while. And then when we unsticky you, you go back to where you came from. So I've laid this stuff down here. How in the world do I move it around? And we use the sticky property again. So basically, I control left click to select, and then I hit P to pick up. So now I've picked this widget up, and notice it's staying with me. So now I just pan and zoom to where I want to go, where I want to place the widget, then I do P to put down, and there we are. You're not dragging a widget somewhere, you're sticking it to your screen, you're panning and zooming, and then you're plopping it back down on the canvas. So that's moving a widget. That's the one thing that people either say that's cool or this is insane. And lastly, here are some of the different settings. We can turn on our database, our PLC, interprocess communication, our stomp driver. So there's different settings there. This sets up tags. So we've got general settings, tags, timers, and let's see, these are built-in functions you can define, and then initialization stuff like the on quit. So that's what's going to happen. That code's going to run when you quit ZOE. So we have a custom on quit function. And usually it's involved in closing out connections. And so yeah, that's kind of what we're doing there. We have this other thing called onion layering, which is more advanced semantic zoom. It's more control over the semantic zoom. Just right click and quit. There we are. That is the ZOE development environment.